My world began in a small, cramped apartment in Fresno, California, where the scent of stale coffee and my mother's cheap perfume hung in the air like a permanent fixture. Fresno wasn't a place of dreams for most, but for me it was the launching pad. Our home was modest, to put it mildly. The walls were thin enough to hear our neighbors arguing. The faucet dripped a constant, maddening rhythm, and the linoleum floors were a patchwork of scuffs and faded patterns. But within those four walls, my mother built empires for me. She worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs, waitressing at a greasy spoon diner where the tips were as thin as the coffee, and cleaning offices late at night, a ghost haunting the sterile corridors of other people's success. Her hands were perpetually rough, her nails chipped, and her back always ached. Yet, when she came home, she would shed her exhaustion at the door like a heavy coat. She'd find me curled up with a book or just staring out the window, and her face would soften. "Yuritsi? My love," she'd say, her voice a little raspy from fatigue. "Where should we go tonight?" And that's how our journeys began. She would pull out an old, tattered atlas, its pages soft and worn from 1,000 imaginary trips. Her finger, caroused in red, would trace paths across continents. She didn't just point to places, she painted them with words. We didn't just look at Paris. We stood beneath the Eiffel Tower as it sparkled to life at dusk, the scent of fresh crepes filling the air. We didn't just see the Great Wall of China. We felt the biting wind on our faces as we walked along its ancient stones, ghosts of dynasties whispering around us. She told me of the vibrant markets of Marrakech, the serene temples of Kyoto, the wild, untamed beauty of the Serengeti. "One day, you'll see it all for real," she'd promise, her eyes gleaming with a fierce, unwavering belief in me. "You'll send me a postcard from every single place." Those stories were more than just bedtime tales. They were the bricks and mortar of my dreams. They were a promise of a world beyond the cracked pavement and sun-bleached strip malls of Fresno. They ignited a fire in me, a relentless, burning desire to explore, to experience, to live a life bigger than the one we were confined to. My mother's sacrifice was the fuel. I saw the way she'd skip meals so I could have a new book, the way she mended her own worn-out shoes so I could have a decent pair for school. Her love was a quiet, constant force, shaping my ambition and hardening my resolve. I wasn't just dreaming for myself, I was dreaming for both of us. High school was a blur of textbooks and teenage angst, a necessary bridge to the future I was so desperate to build. It was there, in the crowded, noisy hallways of Roosevelt High, that I met Alina Rodriguez. We were drawn to each other by an unspoken understanding. We were both scholarship kids, navigating a world of privilege we didn't belong to. Her family had emigrated from Mexico with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and her story mirrored mine in its themes of struggle and hope. Alina was sharp, funny, and fiercely loyal. We'd spend our lunch breaks hiding in the library, sharing not just gossip, but our deepest fears and wildest aspirations. She taught me Spanish, patiently correcting my clumsy accent until the words flowed smoothly. We'd practice in the back of the school bus, our laughter filling the space as I stumbled over conjugations. "You have a good ear, Yuritsi," she'd say. "It's a gift. I didn't know it then, but that gift," a language she so generously shared with me, would become a cornerstone of my future career. Our friendship was a sanctuary, a place where we could be ourselves. 2 girls from the wrong side of the tracks dreaming of a world that was rightfully ours. When graduation came, the pressure to go to college was immense. Guidance, counselors pushed brochure for state schools and community colleges into my hands, talking about financial aid and future prospects. But I looked at my mother, the lines of exhaustion etched deeper around her eyes, and I knew I couldn't add the burden of student loans to her already heavy load. My path had to be different. So I made a choice. While my classmates were picking out dorm room decorations, I was polishing my resume. I walked into a local travel agency, a small, unassuming office tucked between a laundromat and a pizza parlor, and I asked for a job. I had no experience, no degree, just a fiery passion for travel ignited by my mother's stories and a newly acquired fluency in Spanish. The manager, a world-weary man named Mr. Henderson, was skeptical. "It's a tough business, kid. It's not all glamour." "I'm a hard worker," I insisted. "And I know places. I know what people dream of seeing." I started at the bottom, making coffee, filing brochures, and answering phones. But I was a sponge. I learned the intricate dance of booking flights, the art of crafting a perfect itinerary, the complex systems that powered the global travel industry. I stayed late reading travel guides, memorizing airport codes, and studying visa requirements. I used my Spanish to help a growing number of clients who felt more comfortable speaking in their native tongue, earning their trust and their business. Mr. Henderson noticed. Slowly, he gave me more responsibility. I started consulting with clients, my voice brimming with the same passion my mother had used when she described the world to me from our tiny apartment. I wasn't just selling vacation packages, I was selling dreams. And I was good at it. Every commission check was a small victory, a step closer to getting my mom out of her cleaning uniform and into a comfortable life. It was a slow, grueling climb, but for the first time, my dream felt tangible, within reach. It was during a particularly grueling week at the agency that Mark Carter walked into my life. He wasn't like the other clients who came in flustered and overwhelmed by choices. He was calm, confident, with an easy smile that made the fluorescent office lights seem a little warmer. He was planning a solo trip to Costa Rica and had a clear vision of what he wanted: adventure, authenticity, something off the beaten path. We spent hours talking, not just about travel, but about everything. He was fascinated by my story, by the fire in my eyes when I spoke of far-flung places. He told me about his own life, his work in finance, his family. He seemed to see me, truly see me, in a way no one else had. He didn't see the girl from the poor side of town. He saw the ambitious, self-made woman I was striving to be. Our relationship blossomed quickly. He was charming, attentive, and incredibly supportive. He celebrated my successes at work, listened to my frustrations, and encouraged my ambitions. When I started toying with the idea of leveraging my growing client base into an online platform, he was my biggest cheerleader. "You have a vision, Euritzi," he'd say, his hand covering mine across a candlelit dinner table. "You can build an empire." He was everything I thought I wanted. He was handsome, successful, and he seemed to adore me. So when he got down on one knee 6 months later, on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean at sunset, with a diamond ring that sparkled almost as brightly as his eyes, I didn't hesitate. I said yes, believing with every fiber of my being that I had finally found my co-pilot for the greatest adventure of all. The real turbulence, however, began when I moved into the pristine, beige-colored world of Mark and his mother, Margaret. Their house was in a gated community on the affluent side of town, a world away from the Fresno I knew. It was a large, sterile house that felt more like a museum than a home, filled with polished furniture that no one ever seemed to sit on, an unnerving silence that was only ever broken by the tick and talk of a grandfather clock in the foyer. I met Margaret Carter for the first time over a formal dinner she insisted on hosting. She was a tall, slender woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair and eyes the color of a winter sky. She surveyed me from across the polished mahogany table as if I were a curious specimen under a microscope. "So, Eurytzy," she began, her voice crisp and cool. "Mark tells me you work at a travel agency." She said the words travel agency with a faint, almost imperceptible curl of her lip, as if it were a slightly embarrassing social disease. "Yes, that's right," I said, trying to keep my voice bright and steady. "I love it. I'm actually developing my own online platform." "How enterprising," she replied, her gaze flicking down to my hands, then back to my face. The question hung in the air, unspoken but deafeningly loud. "What college did you go to?" "I didn't go to college," I said, deciding to face it head on. "I went straight to work after high school to help my mom." The look on Margaret's face was a mixture of pity and disdain. "Oh," she said simply. The single syllable was a judgment, a verdict in her world, a world of legacy admissions and Ivy League degrees. I was an anomaly, an uneducated outsider. From that moment on, the battle lines were drawn. My life in that house became a slow motion nightmare. I was no longer Ritzy, the ambitious travel consultant. I was the help. Margaret treated me with a thinly veiled contempt that chipped away at my confidence day by day. My cooking was never right. Either too spicy, too bland, or tuck ethnic. My clothes were never appropriate, too bright, too casual, too cheap. She would leave little suggestions. For me, a cookbook on basic French cuisine, left open on the kitchen counter, a brochure for a local community college's etiquette classes placed on my pillow. Each day was a performance. I woke up early to make Mark and Margaret breakfast, just the way they liked it. I spent my days juggling my burgeoning online business, which I was now running from a small desk crammed into a corner of our bedroom, with the endless demands of maintaining Margaret's perfect house. I cleaned, I cooked, I ran errands, desperately trying to earn the approval that I knew would never come. The worst part was Mark's silence. The supportive, encouraging man I had fallen in love with seemed to vanish the moment we crossed the threshold of his mother's house. He became a ghost, fading to the background, a passive observer to my daily humiliation. When I tried to talk to him, to tell him how his mother's constant criticism was hurting me, he would get a pained look on his face. "She's just from a different generation. Eurytzy," he'd say, his voice placating. "She doesn't mean anything by it. You're being too sensitive." Too sensitive became his go-to excuse. It was a dismissal, a way of invalidating my feelings and avoiding any real conflict. He'd watch his mother belittle me over dinner and say nothing. He'd listen to her complain about my lack of a proper background and just nod along. He wasn't my partner. He was her son. And I was just the guest who had overstayed her welcome. My online travel business was my only escape. I poured all my frustration, all my hurt, all my ambition into it. It started small, but it grew rapidly. My deep knowledge of the industry, my knack for finding unique experiences, and my personal touch resonated with people. I was building a community, a network of travelers who trusted me. The late nights I spent coding, negotiating with vendors, and answering customer emails were the only times I felt like myself. The income started to trickle in, then flow. I quietly opened a separate bank account, a secret nest egg that was mine and mine alone. I started paying for our groceries, the utility bills, the expensive dinners Mark and his mother seemed to take for granted. I never said a word. I let them believe that Mark's finance job was covering everything that I was just playing with my little hobby business. The breaking point, the moment the illusion shattered completely, came on a Tuesday evening. I had just closed a massive deal, a corporate retreat for a tech company that netted me a commission larger than Mark's monthly salary. I was buzzing with excitement, desperate to share the news with him, hoping for a sliver of the old Mark, the one who had believed in me. I found him and his mother in the living room, poring over glossy travel brochures. My heart leaped. Maybe they were finally planning a trip for the three of us. Guess what? I started beaming. I just landed the biggest client of my career. We should celebrate. Margaret didn't even look up. That's nice, dear, she said dismissively. Mark and I are a bit busy right now. We're planning our trip to Italy. The words hit me like a physical blow. Our trip. The three of us. I asked, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Mark finally looked at me, a flicker of guilt in his eyes before it was extinguished. Well, no, he said, shifting uncomfortably. Just Mom and me. A sort of mother-son bonding thing. You understand. I didn't understand. I looked at the brochures spread across the coffee table. 5-star hotels in Tuscany, private tours of the Vatican, first-class flights. It was a trip that would cost a fortune. How are you affording this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Margaret let out a short, sharp laugh. Mark is a very successful man, Euritzi. He can afford to treat his mother. And then it all clicked into place. The late nights Mark had been working, the stressed phone calls he'd been taking. It wasn't a big project at work. His finances weren't as stable as he pretended. I had been subsidizing their lavish lifestyle, and they were using my money, the money I earned from my hard work and sleepless nights, to plan a luxury vacation that didn't even include me. The rage that had been simmering beneath the surface for months finally boiled over. You're using my money, I said, the words cold and hard. Mark's face paled. What are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous. I don't think I am, I said, my voice gaining strength. Who do you think pays for the groceries every week? The electricity. The mortgage on this house that you're so proud of. It's not your dwindling investment portfolio, Mark. It's me. It's my little online business. The silence that followed was thick with shock and disbelief. Margaret was the first to recover, her face contorting into a mask of pure venom. How dare you? She hissed, rising to her feet. You ungrateful little gold digger! You come into this house with nothing, and you have the audacity to make these accusations. You are nothing but a freeloader, living off my son's good nature. I turned to Mark, my eyes pleading with him to say something, to defend me, to tell the truth. But he just stood there, paralyzed, his gaze shifting between me and his mother. Mark, I whispered. He finally looked at me, but there was no love in his eyes, no support, just irritation. Euritzi, for God's sake, just calm down, he said, his voice sharp. You're making a scene. Calm down. The two words that had been used to dismiss me, to invalidate me, to silence me for months. And in that instant, something inside me broke. The desperate hope I had clung to, the belief that the man I loved was still in there somewhere, died. He wasn't lost. He was gone. And in his place stood a weak, spineless man who would always choose his mother's approval over my love. I looked from his cowardly face to Margaret's triumphant sneer, and I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of something breaking free. You're right, I said, my voice clear and steady. You're absolutely right. This scene is over. I turned without another word, walked up the stairs to our bedroom, and packed a single bag. I took my laptop, my business records, and the clothes on my back. I left the expensive jewelry Mark had given me on the dresser. I left the life I had tried so desperately to fit into. As I walked out the front door, I didn't look back. The sound of the grandfather clock chiming the hour was the only farewell I needed. I was finally free. The first few weeks were a blur. I rented a small, furnished apartment on the other side of town and threw myself into my work with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed. The pain of Mark's betrayal was a raw, open wound, but I channeled it. Every ounce of anger, every tear of frustration became fuel for my ambition. I worked 18-hour days, my world shrinking to the glow of my laptop screen. I expanded my business, hiring my first employee. My old friend Alina, she had been my rock through the whole ordeal, the one person I call at 3 a.m., sobbing and incoherent. She quit her paralegal job without a second's hesitation. "We're in this together," she said, her belief in me a soothing balm on my fractured spirit. "Let's build this empire for real." And we did. The company, which I named Hatless Travel, exploded. We weren't just a booking site. We were a curated experience platform. We specialized in bespoke travel for people who, like me, dreamed of more than just a tourist trap vacation. My story, which I cautiously began to share on our blog, resonated with thousands of women who had also felt underestimated and overlooked. We were more than a company. We were a movement. Within a year, Atlas Travel was a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I bought my mother a beautiful house with a garden, and she finally retired, spending her days reading novels and planning her first real trip, a cruise through the Greek Isles. It was exactly 3 months after I left that the email from Mark arrived. The subject line was just my name, Eurytsi. I almost deleted it, but a morbid curiosity got the better of me. It was a short, rambling message. He was sorry. He'd made a terrible mistake. His mother missed me. The words were hollow, meaningless. But it was the last paragraph that caught my attention. His finances were a mess. He was on the verge of foreclosure. He was humbly, desperately asking for a loan. I stared at the screen and I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a cold, quiet emptiness where my love for him used to be. The next day, a formal letter arrived from his lawyer detailing his financial ruin and Margaret's mountain of credit card debt. They had no idea. They still thought I was just a girl who ran a small website. They had no clue that the woman they had cast out, the freeloader, had been the only thing keeping their gilded world from collapsing. My lawyer drafted a response. It was polite, professional, and utterly ruthless. It detailed every bill I had paid during my time with them, every expense I had covered, with copies of bank statements and receipts. It concluded by stating that I considered the debt repaid and wished them the best in their future endeavors. I also filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The final act came a week later. A package arrived at my office. Inside was the diamond engagement ring. There was no note. I didn't need one. Their silence was an admission of everything. I sold the ring and donated the money to a charity for underprivileged young women, hoping to give someone else the start that I had to fight so hard for. My story doesn't end with revenge. It ends with peace. Today, I'm writing this from the lanai of my villa in Hawaii, the turquoise waves of the Pacific crashing against the shore just a few yards away. The air is warm and smells of plumeria and salt. My mother is here, living in the guest house, happier than I've ever seen her. Elena is my KO, my partner in crime, and still my best friend. We run our global empire from paradise. I proved them all wrong. My worth was never tied to a college degree or a man's approval. It was forged in a small apartment in Fresno, in the stories of a mother who gave me the world before I ever set foot outside my hometown. It was built with my own two hands, with sleepless nights and unwavering resolve. I didn't just build a business. I built a life. A life that is bigger, brighter, and more beautiful than any of the pictures in my mother's old atlas. And the best part, I'm just getting started. There are still so many places to see, so many postcards to send,